like to welcome everybody today to our library legacy, where we're doing an oral history. And today we have Joe Casey with us. Joe grew up in Richmond. I've known him a long time. We'll talk about the Bank of Somerset and then the infamous robbery, where what he did then he would not do now. And Joe was in the service after school. He worked for several financing companies. He's married, has 3 boys. I think one works in town as an investment banker or mortgage something. And he'll start talking about the history of the Bank of Somerset.
Sure. Thank you for the invitation. It's been a long time since I talked about the Bank of Somerset, the robbery, but I thought maybe I'd start out, and it's good to see you here today because I know you're going to be able to verify everything I say. Oh, you can't hear? Oh, okay. The Bank of Somerset was chartered in April 27th, 1911. So this year, on the 27th of April, will be how long? Girls, good kids here. 95 years. You will have been in business 95 years. The bank was started by H.A. Legranger and his son, H.J. Legranger. They started the bank as two of the primary stockholders, and they ran it up until 1952. Actually, H.J. Legranger, which is Henry, he operated the bank for almost 40 years, which is the son. The dad came, he was French-Canadian, came from Quebec, and spent his entire life in Somerset. So there's quite a history there. The stockholders on the original bank were, other than Legrangers, were Nars Parnell. Nars Parnell is related to Allie Parnell. Allie bought Nars's stocks out. So when I started at the bank in 1972, Allie was still on the board of directors, along with Mill Vanasse and Ed Plurd. They were all directors in the bank when I started. So there's been quite a collection of Frenchmen, I guess, that I've gotten to know over the years, and I've enjoyed it very much. So that's pretty much the history on the bank. There were a lot of owners in between its original charter and its current ownership, and I'd be glad to cover it with anybody that has any questions, because I've got it right here. Mr. Dorr, who was a principal in S&C Bank, he was kind enough to put a history together and did a very thorough job for me. And so anyway, that's what I'm using. So I started at the Bank of Somerset on December 1st, 1971. The bank had only, they had 2 full-time tellers, Shirley Johnson, who had been there for 42 years, and a young lady by the name of Sonia Rivard. Sonia Rivard was married to Mick Rivard. Her mom lived in Somerset for years and years. I can't think of her name.
Nelson. She was a Nelson.
Nelson?
Yeah.
But she had lived here for a long time, and Sonia worked for the bank for a long time too. So they were the ones, along with myself, in the bank when it was held up. The Bank of Somerset, as you recall, you're not even going to recall, but this was the size of the bank when I started. And I know you can't probably all see it, but that was, it had been moved a couple of times. This one, this is where it was located when I started, and there's been like 3 or 4 additions put onto it since it started. I'm going to have these pictures, by the way, over on the table, along with some papers that refer to the bank holdup. So you're free to look at them after the talk. So that's the bank. That's what we're talking about. It was 9:20 on October 18th, 1972, when a young gentleman by the name of Scott Newman came into the bank. He came into the bank with a rifle, 2 rifles. One was strapped to his back, and one he held in his hand. In one hand, first of all, he had a mask over his face. of these, it wasn't a Halloween mask, it was one of these winter masks where only the eyes and the nose were showing. He came into the bank with the rifles, with the mask, and a suitcase in his other hand. I was sitting at the desk, and in the old days, the desk was sitting right in my office was right in the front part of the bank. So you walk into the bank, and the first thing you saw, if you look to the right, you'd see Joe Casey sitting there in a little old beat-up desk, and then the teller straight ahead. So he walked in the bank, he walked in the lobby, and with his rifle down, and I'm jumping ahead of myself. Before he walked into the bank, Al Dickoss was going out of the bank. Al Dickoss has been dead for a few years now, but Al Dickoss just happened to say to the young fella, he says, "Where are you going duck hunting?" He was coming into the bank with the guns and the mask. And the guy just said, "Yeah, I'm going duck hunting." So he walks into the bank, and Al Dickoss goes on home. In the bank at the time that the robber came in, there was a guy by the name of Earl Parent. Earl Parent used to own Earl's Bar over just between here and Somerset, here in Stillwater rather, for many years, and Earl had a bad heart, and I knew this. And the whole time I'm in there, which was with the robber, was probably amounted to about 2 minutes maybe at the most, but the whole time I'm thinking, he's going to have a heart attack, he's going to have a heart attack, he's going to die. But he didn't, thank God. He made it through, and then he and Martell, Steve Martell, they went over to Archie's and relaxed. They were at Archie's for a while, and I'm sure they relaxed in a big way because they had a good time. But the robber came in, he said, "I want your money." And Earl is standing at the counter, he's cashing a check, and Shirley's behind the counter, and so is Sonia, and Earl turns and he says, "What is this? Is this for real?" And the guy says, "Yes, this is for real." And he turns to me with the gun. I don't want anybody to get hurt, so he says, "Just give me the money, and I'll get out of here." And I don't know if anybody's looked at a rifle straight on, but it was a scary, scary.
Did they ever catch him?
Yes, they did.
I didn't know.
He had me scared, and I got up and walked behind the teller line, and I told Shirley and Sonia to give him the money, give him whatever he wants. And so they went ahead and cleaned out. They had 2 cash drawers. He got about $8,700, but Shirley says, "Well, do you want coin in there too?" And I'll never forget this, because if you've ever lifted a sack of quarters, you know, they're quite heavy. And if he doggone Shirley put a sack of quarters in his suitcase as well. And that still amazes me. Had Shirley filled the suitcase with quarters, he wouldn't have been able to carry it out of there. I wasn't thinking at the time it was probably a good idea. But anyway, he had a stack of quarters with him along with a lot of cash. So he told us after he had the money, he says, "Okay, I want everybody in the vault." And the vault was right in the middle of the building, and it was a big steel door. And so we all got into the vault, and LaGranger, who originally built the bank, he had put a little pin in up on the top of the, above the door. And you had to pull this pin out every morning because there was a safety latch on it that when you closed the door, it wouldn't close all the way. You had a little space in the door, and it was a safety latch that he couldn't lock you into the vault, which is probably what a lot of people have heard over the years, that people get locked in the vault. This guy couldn't. The door was shut, but there was still a crack so he could breathe without any problems, so the guy had the money, so the only thing he could do was leave. Well, we did shut the door, and the latch latched, so he couldn't lock us in. And I heard the front door open up, and he left, and there's a pin that you have to put in the latch to open the door up again. So at that time, I had put the latch back in, the pin back in the latch, and unlocked the door and went out, and instructed the girls to lock the doors on the bank, and I jumped in my car, which was across the street in front of Ed Lemire, who used to be a barber in town, and the robber took Earl Parent's white Buick, and I don't know if any of you remember that. We used to, in the old days, leave your keys in the car. And Earl pulled right in front of the bank, and and had left his keys in the car, and the guy jumped in Earl's car and took it. And of course I knew Earl's car because I'd seen him often enough, and I followed the individual out on 35 and 64 out to, I don't know, what was
38th
it?
Street.
38th Street, which is just before you go down the landing hill. He took a right, and I stopped the car because there was a car coming from the other direction, and I was hoping that I was going to get the guy to stop and tell him what, so I could tell him what was going on, but the guy just waved to me and kept going. So I jumped back in my car, and I go down 38th, which also I would call the dump road, or going to the dump. He proceeded to go past the dump, the old dump, which has been out of there a few years now, and there's a hill there that goes down in, and on the left side there was pine trees. He drove over the hill and down into the little valley and stopped his car. Well, I stopped up on top of the hill, and I got out of my car because I was kind of watching him. I was scared because I knew the guy had rifles. I didn't want to get too close to him. So he went into the woods, and he carried the suitcase into the woods with him. So I knew what he was doing. He was hiding the money. He came back, got in his car, and proceeded around the big circle, and I don't know if that's 38th or what it is, but it goes all the way around by the High Bridge. He made a complete, complete circle around that area and came back to the dump. He drove the car down into the dump. If you could look close at these pictures, the dump, you could drive your vehicle down into the dump and then throw your trash on either side. So that's what he did. He drove the car down, but you couldn't see the car from the road. I stopped at the entrance to the dump because I really didn't know what to expect. I was going to close there was a gate out there, and I was going to close it because I wasn't going into the dump. And I look up the road, and who's coming down the road but Dana Smith? Dana Smith used to be the chief of police here in town, and Dana was coming up that same road that we had just gone down. And I stopped Dana. I says, Dana, I says, he's down in the dump. And just as I said that, this guy comes up out of the dump. And I'm standing there talking to him by the side of the car, and I said, there he is, right there. And all of a sudden, the guy gets down on his knees like this, and the rifle is up, and all of a sudden, he starts shooting. He shot about 3 or 4 shots right into the windshield of Dana's car. Well, Dana was driving. He was on the driver's side, on the left side, and he went to fall down like this. And as he goes down, one bullet went through his arm, twice here, and I don't know, it also went through his leg. And when it hit his arm, it kind of paralyzed his one hand, so he was permanently, pretty well paralyzed in his hand, although I think he did continue some work. He was off here, sure.
How old were you when this happened?
How old was I?
Yeah.
I was 32 years old.
Ooh.
But Dana was hurt for a while. He spent a lot of time in rehab and in the hospital. And the car, Dana was hollering at me when he got hit because the car was not in park. It was still in gear. And he hollered for help. The car's going ahead. And as he fell over, he threw the shot. He had a gun in his car, a shotgun in his car. He threw it out to me, out the door, because I was standing with the door open. He threw it out to me. So anyway, Dana is hollering and I'm hiding. I'm hiding in the ditch. And I hear Dana hollering, and I think, I don't know what to do. I don't know if the guy's going to come for us or what, but I made sure that the safety was off on a shotgun because I was going to get in one shot if he did. And I look up, and the guy is going south out of the dump, which is by the railroad tracks. And then I go up and I helped. Then before that, I guess I tried to stop the guy myself. I took the shotgun and I shot. I said, "Stop! Put your hands up!" And he stopped. I guess I shot once. I shot it just kind of in the air because he took off running, and he just kept going. And I thought that was probably one of the more stupid things I'd ever done because that shotgun didn't carry very far at all. Not as far as those rifles would carry. But anyway, the guy did disappear. He went through the fields and into the woods. He didn't have any money with him, but he had some rifles on him. Dana was hurt quite seriously. Put a tourniquet on his arm with my belt. And I guess that I got on his radio, and I wasn't sure how to handle the radio, and I kept asking him how I do it anyway. We did finally get the ambulance out, or Charlie Grant, who was the chief of, was a sheriff, he came out, and he thought I was the robber, and I think he told me to get rid of the gun, and then Dana kind of assured him, no, I'm Joe Casey. He forgot that after the fact, because Charlie and I, we see one another, and we still talk about it and laugh about it. But anyway, Dana did go to the hospital, and of course he was in the hospital. After that, we cursed, they called the FBI in. We had the FBI from Eau Claire, as well as Minneapolis. We had the local police. We had the county police officers here. We had a lot of Minnesota people from Stillwater Police Department and from the county, Hennepin County. They were all assisting, plus there was helicopters in the area. Back then, that long ago, they had helicopters. We didn't have a dog. Had we had a dog, I think we probably would have caught him pretty fast because his tracks were pretty easy to follow. But this is pretty much the FBI that they sent in. There was a large number of people, along with, it seemed like everybody in Somerset had a rifle or something like that from,
Did they have a roadblock?
they had, 64 was blocked off. We had George Sinclair, Bob Lill, Paul Birch, who used to be a county sheriff as well. Those are people that I can remember, plus probably some of your dads were out there that I didn't even know about. They had rifles. Nobody went back by the dump area because they were searching that pretty closely. The individual kind of hid out. They couldn't find him, and then about midnight that night, he did go into Earl's Tavern, and used the phone. And I think it was Bernie Leverty or one of the people in there that they were already on the lookout for him anyway. Called the county in, and of course the county was pretty close by because they knew that he was going to be turning himself in, or not turn himself in, but try to get away. They came and arrested him without incident. He didn't have any rifles on him. He didn't have anything at all other than he was cold and wet. And so, but they kind of knew he was the one they were looking for. Later on, the FBI had told me that it would be helpful if they found the rifles. So we put a reward up, the bank put a reward up, and at that time was nominal, $200 or $300 or something like that, for the recovery of the rifles. Well, wouldn't you know, somebody from Stillwater came over and found the rifles right away. He had buried the rifles under a piece of tin, again, just going down into the Landing Hill area, just about 100 feet off the road. I told the FBI that I had watched the individual hide the money. I told them where it was at. They went out and couldn't find it. So I got in the car with them and took them out there, and they found it within about 2 seconds. Yeah. So we got all of the money back except for $10 or $20. So we didn't lose anything really. He did get some money off Earl Parent, and Earl was cashing a check, I think, for $50, and he took the money from Earl as well. He wanted all the money, and so he was taken to federal court and charged with bank robbery. And of course, bank robbery was 20 years automatic sentence, but the individual pled not guilty by reason of insanity. After many trips, or not many trips, but a trip to Madison for his trial, he was found innocent by reason of insanity, even though he was totally sane when he held us up. He got a little insane, I guess, in jail because he did some strange things in the jail.
And he got how many years?
He was in health center, or not the health center, but in custody, I guess, for 7 or 8 years. He was released. They did not notify any of us, which always upset me. Yeah. But I thank God I've never seen him since, nor do I ever want to see him again. I'm hoping that they told him never to come to Wisconsin, because still a lot of people would stay, probably like to find him, but
Well, man, if you were there that afternoon, I remember we were at school and the word got out, and they were pulling everybody out of that whole area so he couldn't get a hostage. And some of the football players decided, oh, we're going to go see what's going on. And they were three of them in a truck, and they stopped at the roadblock, and the guy got really mad when he found out what they were doing. He and the other kid on the right side, he's going to get out, and there's a guy with a shotgun. Get in that truck, get the heck out of here, and don't come back. Because they were really scared. They were trying to get hostages.
sure.
Did, how did you know it was him? Did he take his mask off at some point where you got to see him?
Well, he had his mask off when he buried when he took the money into the trees. He left his mask. I think I have a picture of the mask and the suitcase where they found it, just as they found it. So I knew I couldn't identify him, guarantee it, but I could say yes, it looked very familiar.
Yeah.
One of the things that I didn't touch on is that after the robbery, when the FBI came into town, they just covered the entire village. They were looking for whatever they could find. And they found a car up there on the railroad, on Depot Road, I think it is, the road that runs parallel to the railroad tracks. They found a vehicle up there, and they knew right away the individual they were looking for because it was registered to him. His thought was that he came to town early that morning, on October 18th. He had a blanket. He walked down County Road I from the railroad track, the overpass there, where he had parked his car. He had a blanket around him, probably not only to keep warm, but also to cover his rifles up, because he had rifles and he had a suitcase. He walked down, he walked behind the bank, and he kind of laid in the brush behind the bank until after the bank opened up. Well, the FBI determined that was the getaway vehicle. And what he was going to do, his plan is to use a vehicle, drive out to the dump, get rid of the money, bury the car in the dump, and then as a train comes across the tracks, it slows way down because it's a high bridge. And he was going to jump on the train, ride the train back to Somerset, get in his car, and go home until things cooled off, or maybe come back at night or whatever and pick up the money. He never got the opportunity to do that, but that was the idea of the whole thing is that he was probably going to do that. Going across the tracks, I don't even know how fast they go, but I know it's quite slow. So it would have given him ample time to jump on a train, ride back into Somerset, and then take his car and just drive away. Yes?
Were there more trains back then? I mean, were like every 2 hours was a train coming through, or?
I don't know. There were a lot more, and see, and I don't recall that. All I know is that that was kind of the idea that the FBI came up with, which made sense at the time. That probably was what he was going to do. Yes.
Joe, did you try to solve this by yourself, just because you're like that, you know, your personality's like that, or I just didn't know why you didn't call the police right away, or had you?
Oh, we did. As soon as I locked the door up, we hit the alarm. There was two things really I kind of didn't touch on, but you know, the bank was old, and so was the camera. We had an old box camera sitting up in the corner of the bank, and it was the loudest thing in the world because I heard that go, click, 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 and he's in there, and I think, oh my God, he's going to start shooting any second now. It was the loudest thing in the world, and it wasn't, but it's just that I could hear it going off. But we also had an alarm in the bank, and as soon as I locked the door on the vault door, we had a button in the vault that we could hit the alarm. So it was Elaine Anderson, who was the village clerk at the time. Elaine looked out and she kind of sensed what was going on, and she called the county, because Dana was off at the time. I don't know what he was doing, but he wasn't on duty. She called the county, so we did have, there were several calls. We called ourselves, but they said that the village had already called. So as soon as, yes, I was not there to do the calling, but Shirley Johnson, who was the cashier at the time, she did the calling right away. Yes?
Do you still have the belt that you wrapped around Dana's arm?
The
belt.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
You
I don't have the belt. I didn't get it back. Don't know what happened to it.
I don't understand though, he shot a police officer. How come he didn't get more time for that?
Because he pled insanity and he was proven insane, I guess.
He got sane in 8 years.
Yes, that's right.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Yes.
If he was insane, why didn't he go to an insane asylum?
I'm sorry, you got to talk up a little bit.
If he was insane, why didn't he go to an insane asylum?
Well, we don't call him that anymore.
What was the question?
Why did he go to an insane asylum?
Oh,
If he was insane, why didn't he go to an insane asylum?
I don't know when they did away with that, but he went to a hospital, mental hospital, what they call them now. I think that's what they've always called them, although they got renamed differently.
Did you find out why he specifically chose Somerset?
Never did. Never did, other than, you know, the size of the bank, the size of Somerset,
Yeah.
and the size of the bank, those two things. And, you know, I didn't even, Somerset always seems to get its name from one reason or another, but, you know, it never stopped there either. And you can kind of see on those, if you got time just to look at the papers, you can see that we hit the front page of the St. Paul Pioneer Press the next morning that the bank had been held up. There's a Somerset Star, which Somerset used to have a paper. I got a copy of that there. Tom Dubé, who was the writer at the time, he wrote the article, and he said that, I think it was on it, as I saw it. Well, it's him, not me, so it's his part of it.
Were there any other robberies there at the bank?
No, that was the only one. That was the only one. And it was the first one in a bank robbery in a long, long, long time. I have a brother over at Stevens Point, and it was on the news that they saw that the Bank of Somerset was on the national news at that time, that the bank was held up. So that was, you know, you hear it now, and you just say, oh, big deal.
Yeah.
You know, but it was a big deal then because people didn't do it, you know. The guy, I guess, had to be a little insane to do it because it's kind of an automatic 20-year deal if you can get away with it, but he didn't.
And if you were there, it's more scary.
At 32, he really wasn't thinking like he would do today.
That's for sure.
Run like this the other way.
Yes.
For him.
did you change any procedures or policies at the bank after the robbery?
We changed so many procedures, it's unbelievable.
Got a new camera.
Oh, we got a new camera. That was the first thing we did. We had, at the time, we had not given out any security programs or let's say, planning procedures like they do now. Of course, it's all mandated now that you have meetings at least every quarter or something. I kind of forget what it is. It's a lot of compliance now with robberies and things of that nature that you now have to comply with. You know, we get to work at, I think we opened up at 9 o'clock in the morning and closed at noon until 1, and then maybe closed again at 3. You know, it was a sack job, let me tell you. But it was a fun job. I have to say that even with all the things that have happened to me over the years, there's nothing, I don't think I ever could have found a job that's been more enjoyable for me, more rewarding, better people to work with and for than here at Somerset. I can get this. Yes?
Oh, do you still work at a bank?
I did until December 31st, yes. And then I retired. I'm an old man now. Yes, Rita?
Are there any parts of the story that Shirley and Sonia would tell that maybe weren't your direct experience? Like after you left the bank and what they did when you were gone and that kind of thing?
Well,
Or what they were thinking when it was happening?
yeah, I don't know. Of course, Shirley, Sonia was always laid back. You never knew what she was thinking, really. Shirley was a little bit more nervous, and Shirley made a lot of phone calls. She called the owners, which would have been Art Peterson and Tom Dorr, who were the owners of 100% ownership of the bank. And I think she just she tried to figure out how much money was taken, because that, of course, we had to be able to balance that out at the end of the day. So they were quite busy. And of course, the phone was ringing off the hook. So word got around very fast. It was on WCCO. My dad was out at the 9 Mile Corner on the other side of New Richmond, and it was on WCCO radio right away that the Bank of Somerset had been held up and an individual had been shot. My dad knew that I was the only person in the bank, and he was sure it was me. Now, my dad has never
How long were you in the Bank of Somerset?
30 years. But my dad has never speeded in his life, never got a ticket. And he said that he had the car all the way to the floor, all the way over here. He was sure it was me that was shot. So anyway, yes.
Did you take all of those pictures yourself? Did you?
No,
bring
these
your
are all
camera?
pictures, I should say. I'm glad you asked that. Tom Dubé, who was a writer for the Somerset Star at the time, I'm going to grab that paper. This was a paper that was put out by Somerset
Yes.
for years and years and years.
President Van Ous's apartment down below.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And so, I don't know, it was put out, but we had our own paper here in Somerset for years and years and years. We did all our advertising. And I don't know what the population was, but
I called Bobby, and I wanted Bobby to come in, because he knows quite a bit about it, you know. And so he was going turkey hunting today.
good. Hope you had luck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yes.
The picture of the photo of the old bank, is that the town hall right now?
That's the town hall right now,
It's
yes.
not like it.
Because I told
Yeah,
him.
no, there was 2 or 3 additions put onto it. First one that we put on it, we doubled the size and added on a drive up on the side of the bank, a drive-through. And so there was a lot of modernization that had to be done to the bank at the time. When I first started in 1971, they did all Shirley Johnson again and the other tellers. Now, it wasn't just Shirley, but all of the tellers, they had to post everything by hand. They'd pay the interest, I think, quarterly, and I'm not positive, but I think it was paid on a quarterly basis, and I'm going to say the interest rate on a savings account might have been more then than it is now.
I think so. I think so.
And they had fixed rates on CDs. I think I don't remember the lowest rate, but I know it was 5 3/4 on a 3-year CD back then. So again, most of those rates, believe it or not, were actually higher than they are right now. But yes,
On the newspaper, who's the picture of?
who's the picture of? Yes, go ahead.
30-some years does too.
You got gray hair.
You got gray hair.
Any other questions?
Yes,
Were you interviewed on television and radio after the fact?
yes, yes. We had all the TV stations there in the world. I mean, it was a big deal back then. I can't tell you how big it was, because they were all covering it. You could turn it on every station, and it was being covered.
A lot of scared people.
Yeah, there were, especially that night, because they hadn't caught him. They didn't know where he was, and they knew who they were looking for, but they didn't have him. So, yes.
Why do you think he hid the money in the woods, and like why did he pick that certain place?
Well, I don't know why he picked a certain place, because it was secluded. There were no houses around there. There are houses all the way around there now. And probably a house built right where he buried the money. I don't even know for sure. But there are houses, all around the dump now, and on both sides of the road. I think the last time I was out in that area, it seemed like it. There were pine trees out there then, Rita. I don't know if there still are or not.
Well, can you give a little better description of where you think it was? He was headed away from the dump?
Yeah, he was headed north from the dump, going north, and then there's a
He
little,
was on the left side?
he was on the left side. There were pine trees in there, yeah.
And how far from the dump was he at that point?
Oh, I'd say 1/4 mile maybe at the most.
Okay, well, that might not have a home right there, but there are lots of homes right
Yeah.
now.
Lowell Peterson lives.
Low,
there.
low, for sure.
Yeah, and those trees are now 56 feet tall.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
So where was the robber from? St. Paul?
I think it was, as I recall, it was White Bear Lake or Stillwater area. I'm not sure, I don't think it was Stillwater, but it was close to Stillwater, I know. I don't think he was in Stillwater, but I'm not positive on that anymore. Yes?
What was the response of the bank owners?
Art Peterson was there within 2 seconds. He was right by my side. I don't know. You probably knew Art Peterson, but not too many people had the opportunity in Somerset to meet Art Peterson, but Art Peterson was at the bank in Richmond for many, many, many years, and he was from Dakotas. Art Peterson was probably one of the finest people I'd ever met in my entire life, and I still say that. He died very suddenly of a heart attack in 1978, which was just 6 years after I started. I was brokenhearted. The other guy, Tom Dorr. Tom Dorr is still very active. He's a major stockholder in S&T Bank, which is now owns the Bank of Somerset. They changed the ownership. They have one holding company which manages some 20-some banks now, and of which Somerset is one of them. So. But in answer to your question, extremely supportive. Tom Dorr, as a matter of fact, just for your information, he's put the history on the Bank of Somerset together, including the bank robbery, and as only Tom would do, it's very, very detailed. It goes 8 pages, so he gave me a copy of this, and I spent the last 2 days looking for it, and I had to resort to go down to see Tom's secretary to get another copy because I couldn't find mine. And I know I put it in a special place where I wouldn't lose it and wouldn't forget it, and I couldn't find it. So. Because I thought it was so important for me to keep it, but anyway, yeah. Yes?
Is Dana still alive?
No, Dana died a number of years back. Dana was a chief of police after Somerset. I'm not sure he ever came back to work at Somerset.
Yeah, he did for a while.
He did for a while.
Private investigator up in
Yeah.
Osceola for a while.
Then he went to Osceola, and Dana died a few years ago of cancer. He went out, I'm not sure where it
I
was,
think it was Arizona, wasn't it?
Arizona?
Yeah, I think so.
And he ended up with cancer and came back to Richmond and died.
It's amazing.
Yes?
Bar where the robber was eventually arrested.
Loch Ness
Loch
Bar.
Ness, yeah.
That used to be Parents. Earl Parent had it.
It used to be Earl's.
Earl's.
Been there many times.
Is that right?
My dad's name was Earl, so I remember it. But Jackie Bro, that was from Hudson, that's his uncle,
Yeah.
Earl and Myrna.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, she was a Bro.
Yeah, I think I did know that too.
Yeah. So I've known Jackie since I was a little kid too, you know, so.
Yeah, well, Earl was a quiet guy, and I was sure he had one heart attack, and I was sure he was going to have another one. And that always stuck in my mind. That I thought, oh God, I hope not. And then he stole his car on top of it all, and I don't know how long it was before Earl got his car back. I don't know if he got it back right away or not. The guy did not hurt the car. He just drove it down into the dump, so it was not hurt. But he did steal it. Yes?
Was that bank that you worked at, was that the only one around Somerset?
That was the only one in Somerset at the time, yes. We didn't have much. We had probably one little grocery store, which was on the corner of Lagranger's grocery store.
Yeah.
We had
Vanaz.
Vanaz.
We had Lagrange's store and we had Vanaz's store too.
No, not in 72 though, Grandma. Not in 72.
Oh, okay.
He's talking about 72.
Yeah. Then we had 4 or 5 bars maybe.
Yeah, bars. Oh, yeah.
And that was about it. Somerset wasn't a thriving metropolis as it is now.
And Morris's Cafe,
Morris's Cafe, yes.
We had a
right
post
next to the
office.
bank. Yeah.
So,
Johnny Stafford.
yes.
Do you cash checks like we do now at the bank?
Do we have one?
Do you like cash checks like we do now at the bank?
Oh yeah.
How'd you do it? Did you like?
Manually. Same way.
I don't think that's changed a whole lot more.
No, it's pretty much the same.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same.
I think there's some people in the room here maybe that were in town the day that happened. I was wondering if anybody else had any
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
reminiscences of the day and what they experienced.
Well, we were all told to lock our homes, stay in the house, and keep the children in. So then all of a sudden word got find these rifles. So I had 7 children. So at the end, we decided whoever would go with me and find it would split it. Well, all my older children looked at me, duh. So my youngest one, Dr. Heck now, he was the one who was always ready to make a buck. He says, Mom, I'll go with you. So we started out from Somerset early the next morning. We walked all the way down. We went around the dump. We kept on going through the back end. We came out on the road by Virgie and Lowell Rivard's. By this time, I'm playing out. He was still ready to go through the woods, but I chickened out. We walked right past the road. Just had we gone through the woods, we would have found it. So that's never start anything that you can't finish. So he didn't get half of the reward, and neither did I. But we were so close.
And they were quite easy to find, but I guess they had a piece of tin that had blown off a car, or a truck rather, or something. He just threw a piece of tin over the top of the rifles that covered them up, and so whoever found them just flipped it over, and there they were. While they were told not to touch them because of the fingerprints and stuff. So they left them there. I didn't leave them there, but they didn't touch them, and the FBI came, picked them up, and so it was.
Anyone besides Joyce with a memory of that day or something?
Well, I owned Ann's Cafe at the time, and so the first thing, my sister called me from Stillwater, who owns Stillwater.
I remember they robbed the bank, and that was about, oh, it was just like a dream, you know.
I don't think she was at the restaurant. Well, anyway, my sister called me and said, what the heck's going on in Somerset? Because she had the ambulance and police monitored. She says, well, the bank just called and it's robbed. And my husband was like, so I said, Joe, the bank just got robbed. He says, goodbye. And he went and got his, you know, his uniform and gun and stuff. And then he went on the hunt for the guys. But meanwhile, you know, after maybe an hour, we're just bombarded with FBI and cops and everything. And they came in and told me to close. I said, baloney, I'm full. I'm making a lot of money. Leave me alone. Get out of here. You know, he said, well, you got to lock the door. And I said, so I don't even remember who the heck I said. Okay, leave people in. We know where they look okay. So that's what we did for the rest of the day until like at 9 o'clock at night we did physically lock and go home, you know, because I didn't want to be there alone that night. And, well, Joe came back home by then anyway. But, yeah, pretty interesting day. Made good money, too.
Anyone have a school memory? Anybody at school at the time that has a memory?
Harry, weren't you in school at the time?
That was my only memory.
Oh.
I mentioned already.
Oh.
It was pretty scary, I remember that.
It seemed to be hard to conduct school, regular, normal school things after that happened, right? After the word got out.
Yeah, it was early in the morning, so it would have covered pretty fast. And they were worried about hostages and things. You had another question?
Oh yeah, did you know, or does anyone know who the man's name was who found the rifles?
No, that I don't know. I was somebody from Stillwater, but I just don't recall anymore who it was. Yes?
So now when you hear about like the rash of bank robberies that have been happening, do you have any feeling about that? Like, I mean, they should have higher security now, and yet it seems that it happens more often. Or is it just because this was a small town and you knew who didn't belong, so you knew what you were looking for? Or do you ever have
It's kind of funny now
that?
that you would ask that, because I've thought of this a lot of times, is that they're no longer going for the little banks. They're going for the big city banks where they can try to get away easier, where they're not noticed. They can slide into different groups of people. You know, they can get away. Just the guy, that fisherman, before they finally caught him. You know,
Yeah, quite a few.
yeah, quite a few of them. So, I mean, he was going for all of the banks in the Twin Cities. So I guess, you know, it's funny, a little town like Somerset, really, if you want something to be pulled fast together, just pick on a little town, because a little town, you know, if you could have seen the number of people from Somerset out there with rifles, and they had rifles. I don't know if they knew what they were going to do with them, but they were out there looking.
They knew how to use them.
You know, the FBI or the county, nobody said, no, don't do that. They were out there. So, you know, that's why I think that's one of the reasons I think that you know, that they no longer picking on the little towns. Although I know Hudson does, well, Hudson's not Hudson must be 13, 14,000 people now too. They seem to hit Hudson quite a
Yeah.
bit because of the freeways there.
Yeah.
They're always looking for fast getaways. They can't do that in Somerset. We got construction. Yes.
I don't know if this is public information or not, but what is the standard instruction to employees as to how to handle bank robberies?
Well, there's a number of them. Now they have marked money. We had marked money too, but it was never given to them. There were traps set into the cash drawers at the time. They don't have these traps anymore because they used to go off accidentally. But you'd pull the money out of the trap and the money would all be maybe photocopied, or at the time all the serial numbers written down. So you just give him the money and tell him to, you know, that would be part of the cash that he'd get. Well, in our case, we didn't do that. We weren't trained enough on it. I didn't personally know. The girls were scared to pull it off because the trap, they thought it was going to set off the alarm. The only alarm it would set off was the camera. They didn't realize that at the time, so that's one of the changes. But they're instructed just to follow whatever orders that are given, with the exception never go in the vehicle. If he says, you know, get out and get in my car, you absolutely refuse to do that, because chances are you're not going to return. If you're going to be taken as a hostage, that's the only thing that, otherwise you comply with all the requests. But they have packets now which look like a packet of bills, only it's got an explosive material in it, it's dye in it, and it goes off 10 or 15 seconds after they clear the front door or the back door of the building. It'll automatically set off, and all the money and clothes and all of your hands and things that it's exposed to is a dye, a permanent dye that you can't get off, can't wash off.
What would set it off?
There's the, you know, like in
Sensors?
stores, they have these little monitors going off that you have to, you take clothes, you can't,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be able to walk out the door without,
Sensors.
because they got those little clips to take off. Well, the dye pack has got a clip in it that sets it off when you go through the doors. So it's on the same principle.
Okay, well, thank everybody for coming, and there's session.
I had a good time no matter what.
Well, it's really nice seeing you.
Well, Anna, it's good to see
And I
you too.
enjoyed that.
Did you hear it okay?
Yeah.
Okay, but see, well, originally, yeah, they'd start there, but,
Like, right now, maybe. Oh, yeah, real bad. When was that?
I don't either.
but I'm gonna write, I've got my dad started out here in Somerset.
They're good writings.
That was good, wasn't it?
They were on first and,
But the second one, that when they robbed the bank, they
Down into the down.
because that's pretty much the history.
But do you see Mulligan's in and read?
Oh, yeah. I haven't, last summer, because they had mass out on the survey.
Bill's, yeah.
Yeah, they're doing.
No. Did they move it yet?
Well, they've been there 2 years now. Couple, 2 or 3 years.
Well, they
It's a
were-
beautiful place and surprise.
Yeah, surprise.
Rather than
Yeah,
go through all
surprise.
this.
What's the name of
Okay.
the place there?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Okay, Dee, good to see ya. Bye, Anna.
Hi, Sharon.
She knows her. Good to see you. I was telling them we had to put a float in the parade, a balloon family. There you go. Right, I bring it.
We rented one and we built
Oh, hi. Now, Rita wonders if there's anything in the, does something